Hey, what's up, everybody? Today, we're going to be talking about the reading rule of the 75 Hard Challenge. The reading rule, of course, one of the 5 requirements, daily requirements, that you have to do in order to complete the 75 Hard Challenge. Read 10 pages a day, and it has to be a self-help book. Strangely, this is actually the rule that I have found most people message me about, trying to weasel out of or modify so they don't have to do it, which is odd because people also hate drinking water, but by far they hate reading books much, much worse. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, as well as give you some tips, tricks, and advice, some book recommendations, just some overall help to help you get through not just this rule of the 75 Hard Challenge, but all of them to help you absolutely crush it. Before we get started, though, as usual, if you find this video to be helpful, please hit like on it, maybe the subscribe, because I do these types of videos and other health and fitness videos several times a week. I've actually got a slew of 75 hard videos, including other breakdowns of each of the rules, 75 hard results. I got 75 soft versus 75 hard. Subscribe to the channel. I've got all of that here waiting for you. So one of the main questions I have gotten over the last couple years is, what is a self-help book? What qualifies as a self-help book? So one thing, it can't be fiction. It has to be a non-fiction book. And for me, self-help was essentially any type of book where if I finished it, I had learned something new that made me better for reading it. So one of my favorite books was Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. It's an autobiography, so it's about him, but there are so many lessons to take away from that. It's obviously a self-help book. By the way, I'm also going to link in the description below a link to my article over on my website, businessshizniss.com, which is the best recommendations, my recommendations for what to read on the 75 Hard Challenge. Now, there are some times that nonfiction books aren't going to work. So, for example, I've got a book about sports mascots and just stories behind them. It's a nonfiction book, but I'm not sure at the end of it I'm going to really take anything away from it that's going to make me better outside of just being entertained. So for me, something like that would not work. You have to self-govern here just a little bit on what's going to qualify. Maybe you read a book on how to do knitting. To me, that would be a self-help book because you come out better. You've come out with some sort of knowledge or something that has made you better after reading the book. So something like that would work for me. But again, self-governance here, you kind of have to make your own mind up on what's going to qualify. Now, sometimes self-help books are long, wordy, sometimes very high-level smarts, but they don't have to be for this challenge. There's nothing that says you have to read giant worded books, whatever. So a couple of recommendations. One is Who Moved My Cheese, and also QBQ, question behind the question. The reason that I recommend these two, which are, by the way, highly touted self-help books, both bestsellers. The reason that I used these on my first time through the challenge was because they were a nice break from the big wordy books, because the books are fairly short. The pages are fairly small. There's not a lot of words necessarily on each one of the pages. So it was easier for me to actually absorb these types of books on my challenge with all the other stuff that was already going on. And it satisfied the 10 pages a day requirement, and it was self-help, absolutely. So you don't have to go big whenever it comes to these books. Now, I did read a couple of big books, which frankly, I just didn't enjoy as much whenever I was on the challenge. But my recommendation here is, if you're going to start a book, even if you don't like the book, finish the book. I did that, and the reason that I did that was I felt like that it was taking the easy way out to give up on a book simply because I wasn't A, enjoying it, or B, not really getting it. I felt like that wasn't in the spirit of the challenge. There's nothing in the challenge rules that says you can't do this. You can absolutely, according to the rules, switch to another book as long as you're doing self-help every day and 10 pages every day. But for me, personally, I felt like if I started it, I needed to finish it. Now, that meant sometimes I was reading books that I was not absorbing very much. And that's okay. As long as you are reading your 10 pages, it is committing to the rule. It is going through the actions. That's the important part of the rule. It's not necessarily how much are you absorbing. It's the part of it about taking time out of your day to complete this one rule. Obviously, you'd prefer to read books that you are absorbing, that they are speaking to you in some way. But there are some times during this challenge, during the 75 days, it's just not going to happen. And the most important thing is completing your 10 pages a day. So just a few words of advice there. I also get a lot of questions of, on a page, what qualifies as a page? So for me, basically, if there's a couple of sentences on a page, that qualifies. That is the page that has words on it, and I finished it. Sometimes some of these books, especially self-help books, they'll have diagrams or they'll have something on them and no words. That to me did not count. So for example, here's a good one. This one has a picture of the cheese. This is on Who Moved My Cheese. This to me would not be a page that I had read. Now, if there was other words, here, paragraph below it, paragraph above it, that would have, but if it's just diagrams, to me, that didn't count. Again, self-governance there, but just my advice, make sure it's got at least a couple of sentences on there so that you're actually reading a page. I also recommend that if you can, spend a little bit of time, maybe a couple of days beforehand, figuring out which types of books you want to read. So one of the mistakes I made my first time through the challenge was that I just used books that I had here at the house already. These were books that I had accumulated that I wanted to read, but maybe weren't good for what the challenge was going to present as far as the difficulties I was going to have. So that's why those big books were difficult for me, where I didn't necessarily absorb them the way that I wanted to, was because I felt like I was so busy with the other aspects of the challenge and just normal everyday life that those big, heavy books, I didn't really have time to absorb those. Those probably weren't good books to do on the challenge. I would have probably geared myself more towards a couple of autobiographies, but instead I read several that were sort of like self-confidence type books, like Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, which I enjoyed, but I don't think it absorbed or hit me like Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins did. So I would probably try to put a little bit of preparation into making sure you got books ahead of time that also commits you financially to the process and the challenge. If you buy the books, like 2 books ahead of time, that sort of like puts you into a position where if you don't do the challenge now, it makes you feel a little bit weird that, well, I did just buy these books. I did financially commit and I've got these books sitting here. You're more likely to actually start the challenge if you have financially committed, even on a small level, to this particular aspect. So spend a little bit of time preparing based off of what you want to learn, the types of books that you enjoy, and then commit there. Don't buy 5 books for the challenge, because you can do that after you get to your second book. Maybe buy the next book at that point, but get yourself a couple to start you off, start the beginning of the challenge with. So the next question, I'm going to end it with this. The big question that I get is, can I modify this? This is the one that nobody wants to do. By far the one that nobody wants to do. And frankly, the answer is no. You can't do anything about it. You got to suck it up. If you don't like it, tough titty, do a different challenge. That's not what's going to happen here. In order to do 75 hard, you have to read 10 pages a day of a self-help book. There is no such thing as, well, can it be a coloring book? Can it be an audiobook, which is a big one that I get, or a podcast? No, and no. You can't do any of that stuff. Can it be an ebook? Yes, because those are still legitimate pages. But there really is no getting around any of these rules, and there is no way to justify, well, what if I XYZ this instead? If you're saying something instead, you're probably outside of the rule itself, and you're going to be shooting yourself in the foot. There really is no getting around it. So even if it's like, again, a podcast or an audiobook, which is a question I get a ton, it does not count. Too bad. You can listen to those in your own time. You can color in those coloring books on your own time if you want, but they do not count whenever it comes to reading 10 pages a day of a nonfiction self-help book. That's all I'm going to cover today. I wanted to keep it kind of short and at least hit on a few of the main things again. And look, subscribe to this channel. I got a bunch of other 75 hard videos on here that goes in depth on each one of the rules individually, and just some general 75 hard type of videos. That's it. Thanks y'all so much for watching. Please hit like, maybe subscribe, because I do these types of videos and other health and fitness videos several times per week. That's all that I've got for you on the reading. You can't listen to podcasts. You can't listen to audiobooks. That's the main thing that I wanted to make sure to get across today. Thanks y'all so much for watching. We'll see you on the next video. Peace out.